In the name of the God who created us. Let's make sure that's... Okay, there we go. Thank you. In the name of the God who created us, in the name of the Christ who teaches us, in the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us throughout our lives, welcome home, children of God. Peace be with you. Good morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church as we gather together as God's people in God's name. It is wonderful to be here this morning. I welcome each of you here. Thank you for being a part of this service, whether you're joining us in person or online. If you're in person, would you please just take a quick moment and sign those blue friendship registers. If you're online, sign in the YouTube chat. Just let us, somehow or another, let us know you're here so that we can count you for our Everyone Counts initiative. Every Sunday we give $1 to a local or different or international ministry. Today is, today is the third Sunday of the month, right? Yes. So our recipient today is Shepherd's Inn, a shelter for women and children fleeing domestic violence throughout Carter County. So just by showing up to worship today, you are helping to support the work that Shepherd's Inn does. So thank you for the gift of your time this morning. Shepherd's Inn also has a fundraiser coming up. This is their one big annual fundraising dinner. You'll find the details about that in your bulletin, and you can get tickets for that. It's always a good meal with great entertainment and, of course, supports the work that ministry does. Next Sunday afternoon around 3:30, we need hands. That's when we get out our Christmas tree and put the decorations on. We put the wreaths out on the doors and greenery on the windows and everything. That goes so much faster if we can get help. So what we do is we ask folks who can to show up here around 3:30 in the afternoon. We're going to decorate the church, put up the tree and all that stuff. And then the worship committee will supply soup for an Advent, just a simple soup supper afterwards. So that's going to be next Sunday afternoon at 3:30. And hope you can join us for that. If you are on the coffee order, coffee is available in the back. It should have a sticker with your name on it. So you can grab bag or bags that your family ordered. And $12 a bag, no matter what kind you get. You just, if you put a check or cash in the offering plate, if you'll just note that it's for coffee, or I think there's a basket back there you can leave money in as well. Okay, any other announcements, joys, concerns? Scott?
The Shepherd's Inn fundraiser information is in the e-news. It didn't make this week's bulletin due to having limited space. It will be in next week's bulletin, but all of those details are in the e-news.
Thank you for clarifying, Scott. It's not in your bulletin this morning. It is in the e-news and will be in next week's bulletin for the Shepherd's Inn fundraiser. So check your e-news.
We want to remember Paul Gerdak.
Paul Gerdak, Scott's dad, has been in the hospital recently too, so I know we appreciate your prayers. Myrna Hart as well, for those that know her, went on hospice earlier this week and probably isn't going to be around much longer. So please keep Myrna and Myrna's family in your prayers. Other joys or concerns? Announcements? Okay. Then we begin or continue our worship today as we do every Sunday. Oh, I need to also, for polity reasons, remind us that we are having a congregational meeting this morning to hear from the nominating committee and elect officers. That'll take place during worship. It'll be a very short meeting. But I'm required by our polity to give you notice of that meeting again today. So notice has been given. As we continue in worship, we continue to celebrate the basic core of our gospel, and that is that God loves us all and all people, without condition and without exception. Because in our unique and beautiful diversity, we all reflect God's image. God's image welcomes our diverse and unique sexual and gender identities: lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, straight, male, female, non-binary. God's love welcomes and includes our diverse ethnicities: black, brown, white, Asian, indigenous. God's love welcomes our questioning, our belief or unbelief, our exploration of the richness of human knowledge found in science and diverse religions and spiritualities. God's love welcomes us whether we are rich or poor, young or old, able-bodied or disabled, suffering or rejoicing, because again, God's love welcomes all people without condition and without exception. So welcome, God's beloved community. We give thanks today for the ancestral Cherokee land on which we are gathered and for the loving waters of the Watauga and Doe River watersheds that nourish us. As we continue this time of worship, we pledge ourselves to work for truth and reconciliation among all people, and respect for creation and for each other in everything we say and do. So let us worship.
The oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and about often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches. And they call again. "It's simple," they say, "and you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine." Our first hymn this morning is hymn 35, Praise Ye the Lord, the Almighty.
Please stand.
take a moment and greet one another. And if you're watching online, enjoy it. Greetings.
Okie dokie, I'm getting the point. The finger of God is pointing at me. I hope everybody understands when we're talking about God speaking from the balcony, we mean Scott. Oh, of course, Wally hasn't started pointing yet. That's coming soon. Okay. No comment. Well, thank you. That's a wonderful segue. I just wanted to mention that the invitation to worship this morning, nothing was said about these trees being perfect. Did you notice that? They were out among the trees. There's nothing said about them being without broken branches or injuries to their bark or their heart. My mic is not on, they say. Okay, he says I'm on. Okay. And I am not perfect. There you go, another segue. Yeah, I suspect you may have feelings that are some of the same. So, in our imperfection and perfection, the paradox, I invite you to close your eyes, put your feet on the floor. Following your breath, noticing that you are here. You too, Evie. Perfect and imperfect, you are here. I invite you to reach out in your mind's eye to those moments we just shared together in community. Let that contact, let that connection, let that love wash over you. And I invite you to just consider how magnificent it is to be able to share life, joy, sorrow, and heartbreak with each other. All in the presence of beauty that surrounds us. This morning, the beauty of the trees. The trees we've watched gracefully change their colors, let go of their leaves, and prepare to rest. Imagine yourself resting right now. Simply breathing. Letting the love in. Just the way you are. Breathing the spirit that surrounds us into your heart. Feeling the love that is yours. And letting that love flow from each of us, from our hearts, from our fingertips, from our eyes, from our mouths. Around the world, to our neighbors next door, to our loved ones in pain. The joy and the sorrow. And the trees call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into this world to do this. To go easy. To be filled with light and to shine. With gratitude for the love we receive, with the joy for the love we can share. We say thank you. Amen.
Today's first reading comes from Exodus 16, 1 through 20. The whole congregation of the Israelites came to the wilderness of Sin in the desert. They began to complain against Moses, saying, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, for at least there we ate our fill of bread. for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I am going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "The Lord has heard your complaining. In the morning you shall have your fill of bread, and then you shall know that the Lord is your God." In the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine flaky substance on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as you need, but no more." The Israelites did so, gathering more, some less. But when they measured it, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul, and Moses was angry with them. Our second reading is from Matthew 6:19 through 21. "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be."
Thank you, Joan and Michael. It was beautiful. And I just want to point out, I was sitting there trying to think this morning. We've heard cello, organ, piano, couple of flutes, handbells, choir. It's just fun to have all these musicians in this congregation, people sharing their talents. And if you have some musical talent you ever want to share, we'll find a place for you. So just making a pitch here. I just think it's fantastic to be able to have all this. And on December the 10th, we're going to have like a Sounds of the Season with a lot of music and different readings and things. So lots of great opportunities to celebrate our music and be involved if you are a musician as well. Rebecca, thank you for that meditation. Where did you sit down? There you right in front of me. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. Megan, thanks for reading this morning, even if it was a surprise at the end. Appreciate you. Way back in the beginning of the summer, when days were long and we had more than 2 or 3 hours of sunlight and it was warm outside, we did a sermon series on practices, spiritual practices, and looked at a few different ones. And I had a whole list of them I was interested in exploring. Because really, honestly, I think the heart of why we gather here, like this congregation in particular, is to try to practice the things that we learn from spiritual guides like Jesus. So at the beginning of the summer, we started off, we went through 4 or 5, but I never got around to preaching several of them that were of real interest to me, and this morning's one of them. And since we're about to enter into the holiday season, I thought this would be a good time to reflect on this spiritual practice. But in case you dozed off the Sunday I introduced the series, or you've slept since early this summer, the quick recap for me is that I don't really think Jesus cared nearly as much about what we believe as the church has emphasized for many of the past couple thousand years. I think when I go back and I look at the Gospels and look at the historical Jesus and what we know about him as a teacher, as a rabbi, he seemed to care a lot more about how we acted, the way we lived. Not just about what we thought up here, but how that lived out in the way that we practice our lives, how we treat people, our family, our friends, and even our enemies. And as I've said before, I don't think Christianity, at least following the path of Jesus as Christianity, I don't think that's so much about getting us into heaven as it is about getting heaven into us in this life, filling us with this sense of that where we live is a beautiful heavenly place, and we can make it more so by the way that we act and treat one another. I think the way we do that is through attentiveness to practices. And if you think about it, in some sense, everything we do is a practice that forms and shapes us. Every action that we take, whether we think about them or not, it's either helping to reinforce something that we're already doing, for good or ill, or it's helping to reinforce a new habit that we want to pick up. I know, a good example for me is exercise. The more I do it, the better I feel, and the more that kind of becomes a part of my daily routine. A negative one for me is news consumption. One of the first things I do when I wake up in the morning is I open the news app on my iPad, and I just kind of scroll through the headlines, and sure enough, I'm sure the first one that I end up clicking on to read the article is one that's going to make me angry. Why do I pick that? I don't know, because it's the one that raises my political ire, and it's clickbait. It captures my attention. And then what happens as soon as you click on one of those articles, The algorithm then will feed me 10 more articles of things that are going to get me to click on them by making me angry. That's how these things work. The news app has learned that the headlines that I click on are the ones that make me angry, and so it feeds me more of them. And it, in a very simple manner, actually not that simple, the algorithms at work are really amazing and complex, but in a very simple way, it reinforces that behavior. I do one thing, and because I did that, I'm getting 10 more articles like that, so that behavior has been reinforced. I think as humans, we are wired to function a lot like the algorithms that work behind on those news apps. The things that we do, the practices in which we engage, are self-reinforcing. And that can be good or bad. It can be good and lead us in a direction that makes us happier, healthier, more community-minded, more compassionate, more generous, more kind, more loving. It can get more heaven into us. Or it can lead us away from those things toward anger and fear and resentment and tribalism, which I think is part of what drives our discord among us and our culture today, because we tend to keep feeding that thing that makes us angry. And the more we feed it, the more angry we get at one another. Now, I think there's a biological reason for that. Those things, anger, fear, resentment, and tribalism, those are to some degree wired into our DNA. They serve an evolutionary purpose to help us survive. So we band together with our group, with our tribe. We are suspicious of strangers. We meet threats with either fight or flight. But I think most religious traditions, including the Christianity that Jesus espouses, I realize that's a little bit of a misnomer because he was Jewish, he didn't espouse Christianity, but the tradition that we get from Jesus, along with the tradition of most religious faiths, invite us to practice some things that are designed to help us see other possibilities, to move beyond that fear and that tribalism and that internal focus of fight or flight. And I think one of those practices that is evolutionarily and culturally and biologically ingrained in us is to accumulate. We store up stuff because we don't know what we might need tomorrow. We store up stuff because it helps us to feel safer. If we have a lot of extra stuff over here, then we have it in the event of a tragedy or, rainy day. And so it helps us to feel safer by having that. It serves a purpose. But I also know that I have a whole basement full of stuff that I haven't used in a long time. Months, maybe years for some of it. But I might need it tomorrow. Right? I mean, I get it. But on balance, the clutter, the boxes, the shelves of stuff, they don't get used, and they certainly don't bring me happiness or joy. One of the foundational stories of the Bible, perhaps the foundational story, because it keeps showing back up in variations through the prophets, through Jesus' ministry, is that first story that Megan read for us this morning about the manna in the desert. The Israelites have fled from Egypt, where they've been enslaved by Pharaoh. They were enslaved to build storehouses to hold all of the stuff that Pharaoh accumulated. They were enslaved because he was a hoarder, basically, but because he wanted more and more stuff. So the Hebrews get enslaved to build storehouses to hold all this stuff. Moses gets them free, that, challenge of the magic with Pharaoh's magicians. Moses wins, leads the Israelites out into the desert. And they find themselves out there and they're hungry. So God sends manna, or bread from heaven. It's funny, if you know any Hebrew or want to know a Hebrew word, manna doesn't actually mean bread, it means what is it? There's this flaky stuff on the ground. The Israelites had no clue what it was, so they call it, what is it? Manna. Bread from heaven for them to eat. Along with instructions that they only collect in the morning what they need for the day. Don't store up stuff, because that's what Pharaoh did. That's what led to the enslavement of the Israelite people, was storing up stuff. And so the rule is only take what you need for the day. If you get more than that, it's going to rot. It's an instruction meant to show that the Israelites did not have to live like Pharaoh, accumulating more and more stuff. It's why if you ever say the Lord's Prayer, or if you grew up saying it, give us this day our what? Daily bread. Not give us today bread for the next week or month or whatever. Give us what we need for today. That's the prayer. That's the prayer Jesus teaches. How many of us have ended up accumulating more than we need for today? Yeah, I mean, you can raise hands. I'm betting it's going to be all of us at some point. Just me. Let's talk about our basement. It is just me in our house, obviously. I know I have accumulated more than I need for today many times over. You can't drive anywhere in Johnson City without seeing storage facilities, those garages built to hold all of the stuff that we can't fit in our houses. They generate $40 billion a year in revenue, and 90% of the storage facilities in the entire world are in the U.S. Yeah, that was interesting. My generation, Generation X, the ones everybody else forgets about, we account for the highest percentage of self-storage users, by the way. Does all that stuff make us happy? Does it bring us joy? Quite the opposite, I think. Quaker theologian Richard Foster writes that contemporary culture is plagued by a passion to possess. The unreasoned boast abounds that the good life is found in accumulation, that more is better. And we so often accept this, we accept this notion without even questioning it, with the result that the lust for affluence in contemporary society, has become psychotic. Richard Foster wrote this decades ago, by the way. Well, I think he's probably still right. But what might it look like for us to try and break that cycle? I mean, Jesus offers one option, which is sell everything you own, give it to the poor, and come and follow me. Israelites had another experience. They found themselves in the middle of the Sinai desert, hoping every morning that God would give them manna for the day. Maybe we're not ready for those extremes. But I think just like every other practice, if this is a value that appeals to us, I think there's some simple things we can do to put it into practice. And that the more we practice, the more we begin to reinforce that behavior, that mindset, that outlook, just like anything else. So simplicity, I think, is that practice that we might entertain, especially as we enter this season of accumulation. So simplicity is just the deliberate choice to focus on the things that truly matter and that bring us joy. It's about decluttering our lives, both physically and spiritually, to focus on the things that help bring out the best in us, that help us feel more heaven-filled. One of the benefits of simplicity, especially as we enter into the season of gratitude, is that when we simplify our lives, we become more appreciative of the things that we already have. Simplifying can encourage us to invest time and energy in building loving and compassionate communities. I don't know if any of you all have ever read the decluttering guru Marie Kondo, or familiar with her stuff at all. She writes a bunch of books about how to declutter, how to simplify your life and things like that. And it's some really very wonderful practical suggestions. But one of them that I like is just pick a space. And as you go through it, just start to look at each thing in that space. And as you pick it up, say, does this bring me joy? Not, could I possibly use it? Not, have I used this before in my life? Not anything else about it, but does this thing bring me joy? Do I get joy out of using it or having it or doing something with it? Does it bring me joy? And if the answer is no, then it's a candidate to get rid of. Maybe we can apply the same idea to our schedules. To look at the things that fill our days and our weeks and ask if those are things that on the whole, bring us joy. And we might not be able to do that with everything. Wally, you might decide that homework doesn't bring you joy. It's still something we have to do. But when we look at the things that fill our calendars, we can say, is it something that makes us joyful? I don't think simplicity is just about owning less and doing less, though those may be some products of living more simply. But I think that at the heart of simplicity is just more about clarity of purpose. So that rather than being pulled in 1,000 different directions, we might ask ourselves if the places where we spend our time and our money and our energy are aligned with the things that bring us joy. Thomas Merton, in Thoughts of Solitude, writes that if you want to have a spiritual life, you must unify your life. A life is either all spiritual or not spiritual at all, he writes. But no person can serve two masters. Your life is shaped by the end you live for. You are made in the image of what you desire. I think he makes that a little more black and white than I'm comfortable with, but I love the C.S. Lewis image of being on a bus that's either moving toward heaven or away from heaven, toward joy or away from joy. And we think about the choices that we make in life, or what we own, what we do, where we spend our time and our energy. Is it moving that bus more toward joy and heaven-filled, or away? So really it's just about attentiveness to those things and making a choice when we encounter those opportunities to spend, to accumulate, to buy, to fill our schedules, to think about, is this something that brings me joy? It's a practice that I find brings me joy when I can declutter things. It's a practice I remind myself anew often to try and revisit, but especially one that's on my mind as we enter into this Christmas season. Thinking about how I can declutter and simplify and focus less on accumulating stuff and more on focusing on the things that bring me joy. Blessed be. Amen. All right. We got a couple things to do real quick here before we finish. The first, though, is we're going to stand up and stretch our legs and sing our doxology together. Glory to God. If you have an offering to share, and please feel free to bring that up while we sing. Drop that in the offering plates in return. And when we get back, we're going to have our congregational meeting and then sing our final hymn. So let's stand and sing now. I'm going to invite Ginger up here. Ginger is one of the two elders, session elders on the nominating committee, and is the chair of that nominating committee this year. She's going to offer the report of the nominating committee in just a minute. But very quickly before she does, just want to say a word. We have elders and deacons in our church. Those are called officers in the Presbyterian Church. Very broadly speaking, our deacons are ones that you probably hear from on a regular basis. They help to care for all of us in the congregation, especially when we're sick or need meals or visits or things like that. But just all throughout the year, they are wonderful caregivers. Our session are tasked with governing the church, helping to kind of provide direction to the church. We have these committees that do things throughout the year. All of the things that happen in the church happen because a committee makes them happen. And our elders are the ones that staff those committees, essentially. And we have a nominating committee that every year meets and tries to suggest some names for elder and deacon. That's what you're hearing this morning from Ginger, and other folks on our nominating committee have been at work for a couple of months trying to suggest some names for us, for you all to elect. So this is always an election of the congregation. No names that you hear this morning are already elected. You get to do that. But our nominating committee will suggest some names, and this is part of the process. So I've just taken a moment of moderator privilege to let us make sure we all know what's going on here this morning so we can take part in it, hopefully joyfully. And so now I'm going to turn it over to you, Ginger, to share the report of the nominating committee.
On behalf of the nominating committee, I place into nomination the following individuals for the office of elder, class of 2026. Jim Austin, Sue Farthing, Suzanne Moody, and Delana Reed.
So, as I said, this is your election. So you all have the opportunity, should you wish, to place any additional people into nomination for consideration. So I'll set aside a space for that. If there are no further nominations, then somebody can make a motion. Yes, Rebecca? Okay, so we have a motion that the nominations be closed, and that means that we would elect those 4 folks by acclamation. So is there a second to that motion? Second. Okay, I think Sarah's was the first I saw. By the way, Bobby is our clerk of session. That means she is also in charge of keeping minutes for this meeting. So Bobby has our motion, our second. So all in favor, please give an enthusiastic and joyful aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say I volunteer to serve. Okay, the ayes have it. So, yes. I'm sorry, we do have, so a quorum in the Presbyterian Church is at least 10% of the active membership of a congregation. It's a low number, but that's the polity unless the church sets it otherwise. So we have an active membership of roughly 140 people on the rolls. If we have 14 active members here, we have a quorum. So I do count at least 14 active members, so we have a quorum. Thanks for mentioning that, Bobby. All right.
On behalf of the nominating committee, I place into nomination the following individuals for the office of deacon. Rebecca Nunley, class of 2026. Lydia Roan, class of 2024.
Okay, so again, I'll offer space if there are additional nominations. All right, we have a motion that nominations close and those individuals be elected by acclamation, and a second, so a motion by Paul, second by Jane Wyatt. All in favor, again, please enthusiastically say yes.
Yes.
All opposed say, I want to serve next year. Okay. So, anyway, I appreciate you all indulging me to take a moment about that. But, I mean, part of this, a lot of stuff happens behind the scenes, and I realize as we do it, we don't always communicate clearly what's going on. So, hoping to take a minute to share that. Ginger, thank you for serving as the chair and for presenting the report. You all will elect some folks to be on next year's nominating committee. That's not happening today. That'll happen at the end of January when we have our kind of annual report date. But so the work that they have done, we thank all of you for that. And next year you'll have an opportunity to be a part of that process. So thank you all. Since this concludes the business of our congregational meeting, we will adjourn by singing together our sending hymn, which is Simple Gifts. It's a familiar tune. The words are in your bulletin, so let me invite us to stand and we'll sing together.
To be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to have gone down where I ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight, where true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend, which we shan't be ashamed, to turn will be my delight, till my turning we come round right. To be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where I ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight, where true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed, to turn will be my delight, till my turning we come round right.
All right, very quickly, handouts coming up. If you were just a break and head out, stick around. You'll get to hear a postlude by the handbell, so we'll just stay in our circle and then depart. Yeah, so